My son-in-law slapped my daughter before the waiter had cleared the anniversary plates. The sound was smaller than people imagine. A flat strike against skin, a fork touching china, then silence. Emily sat beside him with one hand near her wineglass, her face turned slightly from the blow. My 9-year-old grandson stared at his father, as if the man had changed shape in front of him. Richard did not look ashamed, he looked inconvenienced. He told the room that Emily had been drinking. She had finished less than half a glass. Then he said she had embarrassed him by refusing to help sell my house. I did not scream. I did not threaten him. I stood, took my daughter and grandson into the hallway, and asked Emily one question. "Are you safe going home with him?" She said no. So I sent them to my car, stepped outside into the cold Charlotte rain, and made one phone call. Richard believed I was an aging widow who knew nothing about his company. He did not know that the company paying his salary had survived because of an investment my late husband and I made 15 years earlier. He did not know our family trust still controlled 38% of the voting shares. Most of all, he did not know that his pressure to sell my house was connected to millions of dollars disappearing through a vendor he claimed barely to know. By the time he understood who I had called, the records were already being preserved. And the slap was no longer the worst thing we had found. The dinner had begun with champagne, polished silver, and the kind of expensive flowers that looked selected by a hotel rather than a husband. Richard had reserved a private room at Harlan's, a restaurant where the staff knew him by name. The walls were dark walnut. Brass lights reflected in tall windows overlooking downtown Charlotte. There were 10 of us around the table. Family, 2 of Richard's friends, and Jonathan Reed, a director at Halcyon Systems Group, with his wife. It was Richard and Emily's 12th wedding anniversary. For the first hour, Richard talked almost entirely about himself. Halcyon's possible Atlanta expansion, an acquisition in Nashville, a business magazine profile he expected to appear the following month. He called it his company, although he had not founded it and owned only a modest personal stake. People like Richard often repeat a story until they mistake it for legal fact. I watched Emily while he spoke. She smiled at the expected places. She refilled Noah's water. Each time Richard addressed her, she straightened slightly before answering. I had noticed that habit before. I had explained it away. After dessert arrived, Richard turned toward me. "Margaret, did you speak to the realtor?" Emily's hand stopped beside her coffee cup. "I told you last month I wasn't selling." Richard gave me the patient smile he used when he wanted witnesses to believe he was reasonable. "You said you weren't ready." I said I wasn't interested. "The house is too large for one person. It has been exactly the same size for 32 years. A few people laughed politely. Richard did not. "You're sitting on a valuable asset," he said. "You could downsize, invest the balance, and stop worrying about maintenance." "I'm not worried about maintenance." He turned to Emily. "We agreed you would talk to her." "No," she said. "You decided I should." The room changed. It was subtle. Forks slowed. Jonathan Reed's wife looked down at her plate. One of Richard's friends lifted his glass and held it without drinking. Richard smiled again. We discussed this." "You discussed it." I listened. His jaw tightened. Noah looked from his father to his mother. Richard said, "Don't make this into something it isn't." Emily placed one hand near Noah's plate, a quiet attempt to reassure him. "It's Mom's house," she said. She said no. She doesn't understand what she's refusing. I should have interrupted then. For months, perhaps years, I had watched him speak to my daughter, as though disagreement were proof of incompetence. I had seen her check her phone during lunch at my house even when it had not rung. I had watched her apologize for being late when Richard was the one who'd changed their plans. I told myself that marriages had difficult seasons. I told myself Emily would speak when she was ready. Mostly I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, she would defend him and pull away from me. Fear can make silence look like patience. Emily drew in a breath. "We are not selling Mom's house to fix one of your deals." Jonathan Reed looked up. Richard's expression went still. "What did you say?" Emily realized she had revealed more than she intended. I saw it in her face. But she did not take it back. "You heard me." Richard leaned closer. "Apologize." "No, Emily, no." Then he struck her. A waiter stood in the doorway holding a silver coffee pot. He stepped backward without entering. Richard turned toward the rest of us. "She has had too much wine." "No, I haven't," Emily said. Her voice shook, but it was clear. He pointed at her. "You embarrassed me in front of my family." "Our family," she whispered. He looked as if he might reach for her again. I stood. not quickly, not dramatically. I pushed back my chair, folded my napkin, and placed it beside my plate. Emily, bring Noah. Richard gave a short laugh. She's not going anywhere. I looked at him. Until that moment, he had mistaken my quietness for fear. I allowed him to keep that belief for another 3 seconds. Then I said, "You will not touch her again." He rose halfway from his chair. "This is between my wife and me. The moment you struck her in front of witnesses, it stopped being private." Jonathan shifted in his seat. Richard noticed. That was when fear first appeared in his face. Not fear of what he had done, but fear of who had seen it. He sat down. Emily still had one hand against her cheek. Her other hand held Noah's. "Come with me," I said. She looked at Richard. That frightened me more than the slap. Even after he hit her, she checked his reaction before moving. "Emily," I said more gently, "you do not have to decide anything tonight. You only have to stand up." Noah moved first. He slid from his chair and tugged at her hand. "Mom." Emily rose. Richard said her name in a low warning. She flinched, but she walked around the table toward me. The restaurant manager met us in the hallway. "Should I call the police?" Emily closed her eyes. Richard appeared behind us. "No one is calling anyone." The manager looked at Emily instead of Richard. That mattered. I led her and Noah farther down the corridor, where Richard could still see us but not hear every word. "Are you safe going home with him?" I asked. Emily looked at Noah, then at me. No, the answer changed everything. I gave her my car keys. "Take Noah to the car, lock the doors." "Mom, what are you doing?" "Making sure tonight does not become another thing we pretend never happened." Outside, rain had left the pavement black and shining. I opened my phone and selected a number I had not used in 7 months. Daniel Mercer answered on the 3rd ring. "Margaret, I need you to listen carefully." The last time we spoke, it had been about routine trust filings. He heard something in my voice. "What happened?" "Richard struck Emily in front of witnesses. Is she safe?" "She will be with me." "And Noah?" "With her." "Do you need police?" "The restaurant is preserving an incident report. Emily will decide what happens next." I looked through the window. Richard was already talking to Jonathan Reed. His hands moved as he explained something. Rewriting the story before the bruise had finished forming. "There is more," I said. "What?" "He has been pressuring Emily to make me sell the house. Tonight she said he needed it to fix one of his deals." Daniel's voice changed. "Those exact words?" "Yes." "How did Richard respond?" "He hit her." A pause followed. Then Daniel said, "If we open this, it stops being a family matter." 5 years earlier, after my husband died, Daniel and I had reviewed the emergency governance provisions of the Hayes Family Investment Trust. At the time, they had seemed like dusty protections written by cautious people. That night, they felt like a door. "I understand. You cannot use the trust simply to punish him." "I don't intend to. Once I contact the audit chair, records will be preserved. Directors will ask questions. Your voting roll may become public." "I understand. Are you certain?" Across the lobby? Richard saw me watching him. "I am." "Then tell me what you want done." "Activate the emergency provisions." Daniel exhaled. "I'll call Lena Ortiz. Do not discuss Halcyon with Richard. Do not warn him." "Why?" "Because if the house is connected to company money, we need the records before he realizes anyone is looking." Richard pulled a phone from inside his jacket. Not the black one I usually saw him carry, a smaller silver phone. He read something, then moved toward the back hallway. "Daniel." "Yes?" "Richard has a second phone." The line went quiet. "Remember that," he said. The restaurant door opened behind me. Richard stepped outside and slipped the silver phone into his pocket. "Margaret, you're making this worse." I ended the call. "No, Richard." He waited. "You did that yourself." He followed us to my house. His headlights remained 3 cars behind mine as I turned onto Queens Road. Emily sat in the passenger seat with an ice pack wrapped in a restaurant towel. Noah was silent in the back, pretending to play a game. "Is that Dad?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said. "Is he coming with us?" "No." Her answer came quickly, but the hand holding the ice pack began to tremble. I pulled into the garage and closed the door before anyone got out. Richard parked at the curb. Inside, I sent Emily and Noah upstairs. The doorbell rang. "Don't provoke him," Emily said. The words hurt because she had learned to treat ordinary resistance as provocation. "I won't." "Lock the guest room door." Noah stopped at the stairs. "Is Dad mad at me?" I knelt until we were eye level. "None of this is because of you," he said. Mom embarrassed him. "Your mother disagreed with him." "Those are not the same thing." After they went upstairs, I opened the front door but left the storm door closed. Richard stood on the porch in his suit and open overcoat. He looked composed again. That was one of his talents. He could return to a polished version of himself faster than most people could recover from seeing the truth. "Let me in." "No, I need to speak to my wife. She does not want to speak with you tonight." "You don't know what she wants?" I asked her. His eyes narrowed. "You've always wanted this." "Wanted what?" "To prove I wasn't good enough for her." "I never needed to prove that." His hand tightened on the railing, then he smiled. "You have no idea what happened in there." I was seated 4 feet away. She was drinking half a glass. "She has been under stress. You struck her." She got in my face. "She was sitting beside you." For a moment he had no answer. He looked past me into the house. "Emily," I shifted to block his view. "Leave. This is my family. She is my daughter. She is my wife." Neither statement answered what Emily wanted. That was how Richard argued. He treated relationships as deeds of ownership. He lowered his voice. "If you make this public, you will hurt her. You will hurt Noah. You will damage the company, and when that happens, a lot of people suffer, not remorse." A warning. "I am not discussing your companies. Who have you spoken to?" I realized I had said too much. "Good night, Richard." "Did Emily take documents from my office?" I did not react. His gaze searched my face. "You should ask your daughter what she has been doing before you decide who the victim is." He turned toward his car. Halfway down the path, he stopped. "You have no idea what you just interfered with." Then he left. After midnight, Emily came downstairs. She had washed off her makeup. The mark on her cheek had darkened. I made tea. Neither of us drank. For a while, we sat in silence. I wanted to ask how long it had been happening. I wanted to ask why she had not told me. Both questions would have placed the burden on her. "What do you need tonight?" I asked. "I don't know. That's all right." "No, it isn't. I'm 39 years old. I have a child. I should know whether I'm leaving my husband." "You do not have to decide your whole life before breakfast." She gave a humorless laugh. Richard would say that's how you keep people dependent. Tell them they have time until they waste all of it. Richard says many things that sound intelligent until you examine who benefits. She looked at me. He's never done that in front of anyone. In front of anyone? Her eyes moved away. He grabbed my arm once. "When? Last year." "Hard?" "Hard enough to bruise." I stayed still. "Has he hit you before?" "No." "Threatened you?" "Not directly." "What does indirectly mean?" "He says that if I leave, his lawyers will show I'm unstable, that I don't work full-time, that I take anxiety medication." "You take prescribed medication." "He says it will look different in court." "Has a lawyer told you that?" "No." "Then Richard has been giving you legal advice designed to frighten you." Tears filled her eyes. "He knows everyone. No one knows everyone. You don't understand." She said it sharply. I almost told her about the trust, the audit chair, and Daniel's call. I stopped myself. Not that night. "I may not understand everything," I said. "But I understand fear. You were never afraid of Dad." "No, but I have been afraid of losing you." That fear kept me quiet when I should have asked harder questions. Her face changed. "You knew." "I knew something was wrong." "How long?" "Long enough to be ashamed of my silence." She stood so quickly the chair scraped the floor. "You watched me and said nothing." "I asked whether you were happy." "You asked politely." "You always ask politely." "The accusation was fair." "I thought if I pushed, you would defend him." "I did defend him." "Yes." "And that gave you permission to stop asking." "No." She pressed her palms against the table. "You don't get to become the brave mother now because he did something in public." "I know." She turned away. I wanted to explain. To tell her that forces were already moving. To show her I had not remained passive this time. But explanations would have been another attempt to control the moment. After several seconds, she said, "I need to file a report." We called the non-emergency number. 2 officers arrived 40 minutes later. They spoke to Emily in the sitting room while I stayed upstairs with Noah. He was awake beneath the blanket. "Are they taking Dad to jail?" "I don't know." "Will he lose his job?" The question surprised me. "Why would you ask that?" "Dad says when people make trouble for him, lots of people lose jobs." Even in private, Richard had made his power sound like a public service. "Adults are responsible for the choices they make," I said. "Mom made him mad." "No, your mother disagreed with him." Downstairs, a police radio crackled. My phone vibrated. Daniel had sent 2 messages. "Records preservation initiated. Ortiz has identified 2 open audit flags. Then call me when you are alone." A second message arrived from Richard. "You think tonight was about the house. Ask Emily what she took from my office." I stared at the screen. Noah shifted beside me. Grandma? Yes. Dad has 2 phones. I turned toward him. The black one and the silver one, he said. He doesn't let Mom touch the silver one. Did he tell you why? He calls it his work phone. But the black one is from work. A child's observation. Nothing more. Yet Daniel's warning returned to me. Remember that, at 7 the next morning, Daniel arrived carrying coffee and a leather folder. He had represented Thomas and me for 23 years. At 61, he was silver-haired, lean, and almost aggressively unremarkable. You look terrible, he said. Thank you. We closed ourselves in the study. We need to separate 3 matters, he said. The assault. Emily's safety. Halcyon. They are connected. Emotionally, yes. Legally. Not automatically. What did Lena find? 2 unresolved audit flags involving Vail Strategic Services. More than $4 million in payments over 18 months. For what? Strategic transition consulting. The phrase felt familiar. Richard had complained about specialized transition consulting during dinner, as though repeating a label made the expense legitimate. Deliverables? Not enough to justify the fees. And Aaron approved them? Several batches carry his authorization. Aaron Pike had been Halcyon's chief financial officer for 9 years. Thomas used to say Aaron would demand 3 signatures to buy a box of pencils. If Aaron signed, he either knew or Richard pressured him, or the contracts were legitimate and poorly documented. You don't believe that. My beliefs are irrelevant until the evidence supports them. Daniel opened the folder. The trust owns 38% of Halcyon's voting shares. Under the voting agreement, you can compel special board consideration with the support of one aligned investor. Do we have it? Yes. When is the meeting? Tomorrow morning. That slow. That fast. Preservation notices had already gone out. Financial access had been segmented. System administrators were retaining logs. Does Richard know? He knows his vendor approval access was restricted at 6:15. What authority did they use? Routine risk management pending governance review. Lena approved it as audit chair. I looked toward the closed door. Emily said he needed my house to fix one of his deals. Daniel nodded. If he moved company money into a personal investment, we need evidence. What if he moves more before we find it? Halcyon accounts are being watched, but listen carefully. You cannot direct an investigation toward a conclusion because you despise what he did. I don't despise him, Daniel waited. I do, I admitted. But that is not why I called. Why did you? Because a man who strikes his wife in front of a director, his child and a waiter has stopped calculating risk. If he is under financial pressure, that matters to the company. That is a defensible governance concern. It is also true. He pushed a copy of the trust provisions toward me. Thomas and I had invested in Halcyon 15 years earlier, when the company occupied half of a converted warehouse and employed 6 people. It built logistics software for regional freight companies. Thomas believed in the technology. I believed the numbers. Through the Hayes Family Investment Trust, we invested enough to keep Halcyon alive through 2 bad years. We never advertised it. When Richard joined Halcyon 10 years earlier, he knew Thomas had once invested. He did not know the current size of the trust's voting position. He assumed the shares had been diluted or sold after Thomas died. I had never corrected him. At first, secrecy protected my privacy. Later, it protected Richard's ego. That was one of my mistakes. The trust cannot run daily operations, Daniel said. I know. You cannot order the company to fire him. I know. You cannot threaten directors if they do not reach the result you want. Daniel. I am saying this because his lawyers will argue that you are using corporate authority to settle a family grievance. They will be wrong. They may still be persuasive. The study door opened. Emily stood there in borrowed clothes, her hair tied back. I heard my husband's name, Daniel Rose. She looked from him to the papers. Why is Dad's lawyer here? Daniel represents the family trust, I said. What trust? I had hoped for more time. That was another habit of mine, mistaking delay for preparation. Your father and I invested in Halcyon years ago. The investment remains in a trust. I am its voting trustee. How much? 38% of the voting shares. She stared at me. Richard doesn't know. He knows your father invested. He doesn't know you control 38%. No, Emily walked toward the window. All these years, she said. He talked about that company like he built it with his bare hands. He contributed to its growth. And you let him believe you were some widow in an old house he could pressure into selling. I did not expect him to pressure me. That isn't the point. What is? You keep things from people and call it protection. The words landed because they were true. So when you went outside last night, you called Daniel to have Richard fired? No. To preserve records and contact the audit chair. Because he hit me? Because he hit you after you said he needed my house to fix one of his deals. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. I shouldn't have said that. Why not? Because I don't know exactly what it means. Daniel leaned forward. If you saw documents or heard something relevant, preserving it may protect innocent employees. Emily looked from him to me. I found papers in Richard's office. My pulse quickened. When 2 months ago? What kind? A loan agreement, invoices. Something with Mom's address on it. I took pictures, she added. Where are they? In a blue folder. The folder I had seen under her arm when we entered through the garage. Emily frowned. I left it on the kitchen counter. We all turned. The counter was empty. For 30 seconds, the three of us stood in my kitchen, believing Richard had already entered the house. That fear told me more about Emily's marriage than any explanation could have. The folder had slipped behind a stack of mail near the pantry. Daniel sealed it inside a document envelope and wrote the date and time across the flap. Why can't we just look? Emily asked. We will. But we need to preserve the original context. This isn't a courtroom. It may become one. By 9, a forensic consultant named Stephen Ward had copied the photographs, preserved their metadata, and recorded how Emily obtained them. At 10, Rachel Kim arrived. She was a family law attorney in her early 40s, with a calm voice and no interest in theatrics. She met Emily in the kitchen. I remained long enough to introduce them, then Rachel asked, Emily, do you want your mother to leave while we talk? My daughter looked guilty. I don't know. That means yes, Rachel said. I appreciated her immediately. I'll be in the study. When Rachel called me back 40 minutes later, she had divided a legal pad into 3 columns: physical safety, financial safety, know nothing about destroying Richard, nothing about taking everything he owned, just practical subjects. We are discussing temporary measures, Rachel said. Not permanent decisions. Emily looked at me. She says I don't have to decide whether to divorce him today. That is what I told you. Yes, but she's a lawyer. Rachel almost smiled. Then Emily told me about Richard's rules. He did not call them rules. He called them agreements, standards, systems. She had to answer when he called, even while driving. She sent him grocery receipts. She shared passwords. He monitored her location. Did you have his passwords? Rachel asked. He said corporate security made that impossible. Could you turn off location sharing? He asked why. What happened if you did? He called until I answered. I remembered lunches when Emily placed her phone face up beside her plate. Visits shortened because Richard needed something. He read your messages, I asked. Sometimes? To whom, my friends? You. I thought of the cheerful, useless messages I had sent. Lunch next week? Are you free Sunday? I had never written what mattered. Are you afraid of him? Do you need somewhere safe? Does he forbid you from seeing people? Rachel asked. No, Emily answered too quickly. Then she closed her eyes. He says I'm free to do whatever I want. He just makes sure I understand what it will cost. That sentence explained the architecture of his control. No locked doors. No written commands. Just consequences applied until choice became theoretical. She told us about Carla, her closest friend from college. Richard never said Emily could not see her. He merely punished her with silence, canceled plans, or moved money whenever she did. He reviewed Emily's design proposals. He rejected male clients he considered too friendly. He called low-paying work disrespectful of the family. What happens when you disagree? I asked. He makes it miserable until I apologize for working, for disrespecting him. Anger rose in me, Rachel noticed. Margaret, listen without reacting. I am listening. Emily gave me a look that said I was not doing it well. Rachel asked about threats involving Noah. He says no judge would give primary custody to a woman with no real career, anxiety medication, and a history of emotional instability. What history? Rachel asked. Hospitalized? No. Substance abuse? No. Any danger to yourself or Noah? No. Then Richard has been presenting speculation as legal fact. He knows judges. He knows how to say he knows people. Emily's eyes, Rachel asked. No. Grabbed him? No. Broken things around him. Emily paused. A lamp. Last spring. Why? I had lunch with Carla. Was Noah present? He was upstairs. Did he hear it? A small voice came from the hallway. Yes. We turned. Noah stood there with his backpack. Behind him was the school counselor. who had brought him home after he complained of a stomachache. Emily knelt in front of him. "You weren't supposed to hear this. I came in when Grandma said my name." He leaned against her side. "Dad says when people ask too many questions, they get fired." The room went still. "Who did he say that about?" I asked. "Mr. Pike." "Aaron Pike?" Noah nodded. "Where did you hear him?" "In the garage. He was on the silver phone. He said Mr. Pike needed to remember who signed his checks." Rachel held up a hand. "No more questions." She told Emily to write the exact words down and not ask Noah to repeat them. He was a child, not an investigator. My phone rang. "Daniel. We have Aaron's email," he said. "It's worse than he described." 3 weeks before the dinner, Aaron had written that Vail Strategic Services appeared to have no staff capable of performing the billed work. He recommended stopping payments until compliance reviewed the relationship. Richard replied that the matter was above Aaron's authority and ordered the next payment released. 3 days after that payment, $750,000 entered an outside real estate partnership in which Richard held an interest. "From Vail?" I asked. "We don't know yet, the timing matches." Noah's observation was not proof, neither was the transfer by itself. But the pieces were beginning to face the same direction. Emily's phone rang. Richard's name appeared. She let it stop. A message arrived. "Tell your mother to stay out of my company. Then we can talk about bringing Noah home." Rachel looked at the screen. "Save that." Emily took a screenshot. Richard had spent years teaching her that resistance would cost everything. Now he was beginning to document the lesson. The next morning, Halcyon held its emergency board meeting. The company occupied a glass building outside downtown Charlotte. Thomas had once visited when the entire staff could fit around our dining table. Now a digital wall in the lobby displayed shipping routes across the world. The receptionist did not recognize me. Margaret Hayes. Board meeting. She checked her screen, her posture changed. "Mr. Mercer is waiting upstairs." Daniel met me outside the boardroom. "Richard is here. He brought personal counsel." "Of course, inside." Lena Ortiz sat near the center of the table. She had spent years in financial regulation before joining Hal's board and chaired it committee. Aaron Pike sat 2 chairs away, pale and rigid. Richard stood at the far end speaking to 2 directors. Then he saw me. "What are you doing here?" "Good morning. This is a corporate meeting, yes." His lawyer whispered to him. Richard looked at the nameplate before me. "Hayes Family Investment Trust." "You're the trust representative." "I am." His face changed in stages: confusion, calculation, anger. "How much do you control?" "That information has always been available in the shareholder records." "You hid it." "I protected my privacy." "You let me run this company without disclosing a material conflict." Lena spoke. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Hayes' voting role is documented. Your failure to review the shareholder agreement is not a disclosure failure on her part. This meeting is retaliation." "Sit down," Lena said. He remained standing 1 second too long. Then he sat. Outside counsel explained the purpose of the meeting. No finding of fraud was being made. The board was deciding whether Richard could remain in operational control during an independent review. The concerns were limited but serious. Suspicious payments to Vail, incomplete work product, 2 audit flags. Richard's attempt to use Halcyon's communications department to describe the dinner as a medical episode involving Emily, and a possible connection between his outside obligations and company vendors. Richard's lawyer objected that he had not been given enough time to respond. "You will have time," Lena said. "Today's proposal is paid administrative leave pending review." Richard turned toward Aaron. "You approved those invoices." Aaron swallowed. "I approved payment batches based on executive authorization." "You knew exactly what they were. I knew how they were classified." "That is not what I asked." Lena lifted a hand. "Mr. Cole, questions go through the chair." For years, Richard controlled rooms by making correction feel rude. Lena did not suffer from that weakness. The board unanimously approved record preservation and an independent forensic review. The motion to place Richard on administrative leave passed 4 votes to 2. Richard stared at the directors. "This company is in the middle of major negotiations. Removing me will cost millions. An interim operating committee has been appointed." Lena said. "The customers trust me. Then your absence should not alter the value of the business." He looked at me. "This is what you wanted." I said nothing. Any emotional answer would allow him to turn the room away from documents and toward family conflict. Lena read the access restrictions. Richard would retrieve personal property only under supervision. Company systems would remain locked. His hand moved toward his jacket. For a moment, I thought of the silver phone. He seemed to think of it too. His fingers stopped. Then he looked at Aaron. The look lasted less than a second, but Lena saw it. Richard left with his lawyer. The door had barely closed when Lena turned to Aaron. "Is there something you would like to tell the committee?" His face went gray. "I need counsel." "That can be arranged." He stared at the closed door. "I sent Richard an email 3 weeks ago." "About Vale?" "Yes." "What did you say?" "That the contract descriptions did not support the payments, that we should stop until compliance reviewed them." "What was his response?" "He told me to stop creating a paper trail." Before anyone could answer, Richard's raised voice sounded from the hallway. The door opened. He stood there without his lawyer, his composure gone. He pointed at Aaron. "Fix the Vale problem before they find it." Then he realized the entire room had heard him. For one extraordinary second, no one moved. Security appeared behind him. Lena's voice remained calm. "Mr. Cole, leave the building." Richard looked at me. His eyes held no shame, only hatred. And beneath it, fear. By the time I returned home, Emily had stripped the clean guest room sheets, washed them, and remade the bed with tight hospital corners. That was how my daughter handled fear. She made things orderly. When I told her Richard had been suspended, she stopped rinsing a plate at the sink. "You had him removed." "The board placed him on leave. Because of me?" "Because of financial questions, his attempt to misuse company staff, and concerns about his judgment." "You called because of me?" "Yes, and now everyone will know." "Several directors know." "Which means everyone will know by tomorrow." Rachel closed her legal pad. "Emily, do you want your mother to leave?" Again. My daughter hesitated. "Again." I left. In the study, 3 messages waited. Daniel wrote that the audit committee had secured Aaron's email. Lena wrote that Richard's building access and credentials were disabled, but his corporate devices remained unaccounted for. Richard wrote, "You have made a serious mistake. Emily will pay for it long after you get bored with playing powerful." I forwarded the message to Daniel and placed the phone face down. Through the wall, I heard Rachel's steady questions, Emily's hesitant answers, and long silences. At one point, Emily laughed sharply. Later, she cried. I stood then sat again. Going to her would have made me feel useful. It might not have helped her. When Rachel finally called me back, Emily looked exhausted but less guarded. She agreed to document the assault and seek temporary protection. She did not decide on divorce. She filed the police report in her own words. She also admitted that she had maintained an emergency account, funded by freelance design work, and stored copies of passports, insurance records, and birth certificates in a safe deposit box. "When did you begin preparing?" I asked later. "I wasn't preparing. I was thinking about preparing." "That is preparing." "No. Preparing means you intend to go." She removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. I wanted to know that I could. That afternoon, we opened the blue folder in Daniel's conference room. Stephen Ward projected the first photograph, an invoice from Vale Strategic Services. Strategic Transition Consulting, $286,500. The description contained vague language about market positioning and regional growth. The second invoice used the same description, the same amount, a different month. The third showed Aaron's electronic approval and Richard's executive override. "Is that unusual?" Emily asked. "It depends on the contract. That means yes. It means we do not decide from 3 photographs." The next image showed a loan agreement involving Cedar Ridge Development Partners. Richard had signed a personal guarantee for $3.8 million. The loan matured in 5 weeks. In the margin were 4 handwritten words, "Hayes property after closing." I leaned forward. "That's your house," Emily said. "Yes." The following page listed collateral and supplemental liquidity requirements. Then came a draft letter addressed to me, authorizing Richard to communicate with a realtor and financial advisor. The signature line was blank. Beside it was a photocopy of my signature from an unrelated charitable form. "Where was this?" I asked. "Under the loan papers." "Did he ask you to obtain my signature?" "He asked whether I had access to your files." "When?" 6 months ago." "What did you say that you would know if anything was missing?" "What did he say?" He laughed. Stephened a spreadsheet listing, Vale payments beside abbreviations CRs Reserve, MV Fee Bridge, Personal Carry. 3 payment dates fell within days of Cedar Ridge loan deadlines. Halcyon payment. 2 days later, Cedar Ridge deposit, another Halcyon payment. 3 days later, a reduction in the personal guarantee, not proof of the route, a pattern. The next photograph showed Richard's calendar, A. Pike M. Vale D. Foster, the Cedar Ridge lender. One entry appeared 8 days before the anniversary dinner. Emily. Hayes' decision. He scheduled me, Emily said. What happened that day? Rachel asked. He told me to take Mom to lunch. I canceled because Noah had a dentist appointment. What did Richard do? He said I never supported him when it mattered. The financial pressure had moved through their marriage disguised as disappointment. The final image was a handwritten list. M. House Realtor Valuation. Signature sample. Emily Alternative. Timing before DF call. At the bottom underlined twice. Need clean source of funds. No one spoke. Where exactly was that page? Rachel asked. Inside the loan folder. The metadata showed Emily had photographed it at 11:43 on a night when Richard was in Atlanta. What were you doing in his office near midnight? I asked. Looking for my passport. Why? Because I wanted to know whether I could leave. The room seemed to lose sound. She had not been waiting for rescue. She had been preparing before I understood she was in danger. A message reached Daniel while we were still reviewing the files. Someone had attempted to access Halcyon's vendor master records at 11:38 on the night of the dinner. The new restrictions blocked the attempt. At 11:38, Richard had been following us toward my house. Could it have come from the silver phone? I asked. Possibly. Emily stared at the words on the screen. Indeed, clean source of funds. What was he trying to change? We don't know, Daniel said. She almost laughed, but urgency had already told us something. Richard believed the records mattered enough to reach before anyone else did. The next morning he called Emily. She disclosed that the conversation might be documented, then placed him on speaker. I'm sorry, he began. What happened was unacceptable. Yes, Emily said. I was under enormous pressure. That does not make it acceptable. I just said that. No, you said it happened because you were under pressure. Silence, then he softened his voice. You know I would never intentionally hurt you. You hit me. I lost control for 1 second, and told everyone I was drunk. I was trying to calm the situation. You asked the company to call it a medical episode. Who told you that? That isn't the point. It is absolutely the point. Your mother has inserted herself into matters she does not understand. Emily looked at me, then asked, why do you need her to sell the house? What? I saw the loan papers. Why did you write Hayes property after closing? The silence that followed was absolute. We had agreed not to reveal everything. Emily realized too late what she had disclosed. Richard spoke carefully. You went through my office. I was looking for my passport. You stole confidential documents. I photographed papers involving my mother's property. You had no right. You had no right to plan around her house. I was considering options. For what? This is exactly why you should not involve yourself in complicated financial matters. The old method, dismiss the question by attacking her ability to understand it. Explain it simply, Emily said. His tone changed. Where is the folder? I'm not answering that. Did your mother give it to the board? I'm not answering that. Do you understand what you have done? I documented what you were doing. You photographed incomplete drafts and handed them to people determined to destroy me. No one forced you to write my mother's address beside your debt. Put Noah on the phone. He's at school. I called. They told me I'm no longer authorized to pick him up. We made a temporary change. You had no right without consulting me. I'm his mother, so you're keeping my child from me. Your lawyer can arrange safe contact through Rachel. Rachel? My attorney, he breathed quietly into the phone. You hired a divorce lawyer because your mother told you to. No, I know you. This isn't you. For years, he had used that sentence to separate Emily from her own choices. You have spent a long time telling me what is and isn't me, she said. I know you better than anyone. No, you know the version of me that causes the fewest problems for you. He stopped apologizing. I want to see Noah tonight. Your lawyer can contact Rachel. I am not asking permission to see my son. And I am not discussing it without a safe plan. Then he said, your mother will lose that house before this is over. Emily looked at me. What does that mean? Richard tried to retreat. Legal fees, taxes, the consequences of turning private matters into corporate warfare. That is not what you said. Stop twisting my words. The call ended. Emily saved the recording. Can he hurt you financially? She asked. He can try. That is not reassuring. I have resources and counsel. How much is the trust worth? I hesitated. Her expression hardened. No more secrets. Enough that Richard cannot frighten me with legal fees. You should have told me. Yes. When? Years ago. The answer softened something, though it did not repair it. An hour later, Daniel called us back to his office. The forensic team had connected Vail Strategic Services to Cedar Ridge. Halcyon had paid Vail $4.26 million over 18 months. Vail then transferred money through entities controlled by Marcus Vail. Approximately $1.9 million reached Cedar Ridge. Richard owned 42% of Cedar Ridge, Marcus owned 28%. He told me Marcus was just an old college friend, Emily said. He was also his business partner. Lena replied from the screen. Was that disclosed to Halcyon? No. Even if the consulting services had been legitimate, Richard had approved payments to a company owned by an undisclosed partner. Stefan displayed an internal memorandum signed by Richard. It certified that Vail had no reportable relationship with any Halcyon executive. Then an email appeared. Aaron had asked Richard to confirm whether any executive held a personal or financial relationship with the vendor. Richard replied, "No reportable relationship. Release payment as scheduled." He lied. Emily said no one corrected her. Then she remembered 6 forms Richard had asked her to sign before. He said they were routine. "Did you read them?" Rachel asked. "No. Do you have copies?" "Maybe in our shared tax folder." She opened the cloud account. The password failed. She tried again. A notice appeared. Passwords changed 37 minutes ago. Her phone vibrated. A transfer had been initiated from the household savings account, $180,000. I did not authorize that. A second account locked after another password change. Richard had stopped trying to persuade her. He had begun moving money. The bank delayed the transfer because it was going to a newly linked account. Had he divided it into smaller amounts, it might have succeeded. Arrogance made him impatient. Rachel sought temporary financial restraints before the court closed. By the second week, the story no longer belonged to one dinner. Vail Strategic Services had a website full of stock photographs, no listed employees, no client names, and a mailbox address at a commercial shipping center. The original contract was not obviously fraudulent. Marcus had completed a 6-week market analysis worth perhaps $175,000. The amendments changed everything. One extended the work. Another added confidential acquisition planning. Another added executive transition support. Each remained just below the threshold requiring full board approval. A 6-week project became 18 months of payments. Richard had not moved $4 million in one dramatic transaction. He built the fraud in increments small enough to appear administrative. Vail's reports contained copied public research, recycled charts, and paragraphs reused under different city names. They provided just enough paper for accounting files. A comment attached to one invoice read, "Release before strategic reserve deadline." Cedar Ridge's lender reports used the same phrase. Then Halcyon found an internal email showing Richard instructing Marcus to describe them only as college friends if Aaron asked about their relationship. The mechanism was becoming visible. Halcyon paid Vail. Vail routed money through Redfern Advisory. Redfern funded Cedar Ridge. Cedar Ridge used the money to meet lender demands connected to Richard's guarantee. Not every dollar could yet be traced. Enough could. While investigators followed the money, Richard used the family court filings and the press to build another story. He described the restaurant assault as a single disputed moment during an emotional marital disagreement. He accused Emily of stealing confidential records. He accused me of using hidden voting power to conduct a family coup. A local business reporter contacted Halcyon about an investor-led takeover. The company's largest customer received an anonymous packet claiming the board had become an instrument of one family. The customer suspended renewal discussions. For the first time, Richard's counterattack threatened hundreds of employees. At an emergency board call, several directors questioned me. Had I disclosed that Richard was my son-in-law when he became CEO? The conflict record confirmed it. Had I advocated for his promotion? No, I had abstained. Why had the trust's role remained private? Because Halcyon was privately held and the trust had no operational function. Still, the appearance was damaging, so I recused myself from the audit committee's evidence review. I retained my voting rights on final governance questions, but gave up access to investigative details beyond what every director received. Richard interpreted restraint as weakness. The next morning, an email arrived from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Your daughter is not innocent." Attached was a bank statement showing $46,000 in deposits to Emily's private account over 2 years. Richard wanted the account to look like theft. The records showed every deposit came from Emily's freelance design work. She had paid taxes. She had saved the money in case Richard cut off access to the household accounts, and she needed a lawyer. "Do you believe me?" she asked. "I believe the records will show the truth." "That isn't what I asked." I closed my eyes. "Yes, Emily, I believe you." Richard's version depended on noise, the dishonest wife, the manipulative mother, the frightened CFO, the biased board. If enough people doubted everyone, the fraud might disappear inside the confusion. Then he contacted Noah through the boys' school email. The first message said he missed him. The second said angry adults sometimes told stories that were not true. The third asked, "Do you remember where Mom put the blue folder when you left Grandma's house?" Emily read it 3 times. Richard had used his son's love to search for evidence. That changed her uncertainty. "I want the protective order," she told Rachel. "What changed?" Rachel asked. "He involved Noah. Say it in your own words." Emily looked at the message. "I believed he wanted to see his child. He wanted information. He used Noah because he thought a 9-year-old would be easier to control than I was." The court entered temporary limits on direct contact, unusual transfers, and access to Noah while fuller arrangements were reviewed. No permanent custody decision was made. No marriage was ended by one order. But for the first time, Richard's access was not determined by his demands. The same week, Aaron retained counsel and began cooperating under Halcyon's whistleblower process. He admitted he had approved payment batches after he no longer trusted the documentation. Why? Outside counsel asked. Fear, career, stock options. He did not become a hero by telling the truth late. He accepted that his silence had helped Richard. Aaron also preserved a vendor due diligence form signed by Richard 4 months after Searidge was created. The form asked whether any executive had a financial relationship with the vendor or its principals. Richard marked no. He had not overlooked the question. He had answered it falsely. Then someone sent me a photograph of my house. It was taken from across the street. Beneath it were 6 words, "Nice place." Shame to lose it. The police documented the threat, but no one was waiting outside when officers arrived. The number traced back to a prepaid cellular account associated with a reseller used by Vail. That same evening, Marcus attempted to transfer $900,000 from his business account to an overseas fund. The bank delayed it. Someone had warned him. By the 3rd week, lawyers had negotiated a supervised retrieval of Emily's and Noah's personal property from the marital home. I did not go. Rachel accompanied Emily. A neutral officer documented the visit. Richard remained in another part of the house with his lawyer. Emily recovered clothing, school records, insurance documents, and her design portfolio. When she asked to retrieve boxes from the detached garage, Richard objected. The garage contained business property, he claimed. The officer allowed Emily to collect only items she identified as hers. Inside an old design file box, she found a printed presentation titled Cedar Ridge Capital Recovery Plan. Page 9 listed HS strategic payments beside dates matchings and Halcyon's transfers to Vail. Page 11 read, Hayes property liquidity, preferred clean source, a charger for an older silver phone plugged in near a wall-mounted lockbox. The phone was gone. Richard demanded the return of the blue folder and threatened to make sure Emily never worked in design again. The retrieval officer heard him. His own lawyer told him to stop speaking. Later that afternoon, Halcyon's technical team found an archived email attachment with the same Cedar Ridge presentation. Marcus had sent it to Richard 7 months earlier. The email body contained one sentence. Once the old woman signs, the reserve gap disappears. Richard's reply was shorter. Emily will handle her. For months, he had treated my daughter as a tool for reaching my property. When she failed, he struck her. And when I acted, he called it interference. The lockbox remained closed for 4 days while counsel negotiated a lawful inspection protocol. A neutral examiner would separate private material, possible company records, marital financial documents, and privileged communications. Truth did not become lawful simply because we wanted it quickly. When the lockbox finally opened, it contained cash, external drives, printed Halcyon emails, a notebook, and the silver phone. The phone's local messages had been largely deleted. The external drives held backups, not complete ones. Enough. Richard's account sent a remote erasure command after the phone entered forensic custody. The examiner had isolated the device, so the command failed. The system preserved the attempt. On OneDrive, investigators found a spreadsheet listing Halcyon payment dates, Vail receipts, Redfern transfers, and Cedar Ridge obligations. At the bottom appeared a projected final step, MH sale, 1.45 net to R guarantee. My house had been reduced to 2 initials and an estimated amount. The recovered Cedar Ridge presentation contained speaker notes missing from the printed copy. On the slide labeled Strategic Reserve, the note read, Route through VS. Maintain deliverable cover. The file metadata listed Richard as the author. The notebook contained another page titled E-Options. Emily's initials. Beneath them were financial and custody considerations. He had planned how to frighten her if she resisted. The phone contained messages between Richard and Marcus, not one perfect confession. Something's more credible. Contradictions, timing, instructions, and ordinary language used by men who believed the details would remain private. Marcus wrote that Aaron wanted another description before releasing a payment. Richard replied, use the expansion report. Change region and dates. Marcus answered that they had already used it for Cincinnati. Richard wrote, then call it transition support. He only needs paper. Another exchange showed Marcus telling Richard that Aaron had asked whether they were business partners. Richard replied, if he asks again, the answer is college friends. Then came the route itself. Marcus needed $500,000 before a lender call. Richard wrote that Vail would receive $620,000 on Tuesday, and instructed him to route $400,000 through the same path. On Tuesday morning, Halcyon paid Vail $620,000. That afternoon, Vail sent $480,000 to Redfern. The next morning, Redfern transferred $400,500 to Cedar Ridge. There were 7 documented cycles. 4 more remained under review. The messages concerning my house were equally plain. Marcus asked whether the lender would extend without clean equity. Richard wrote, I'm working on the house. Marcus asked, your house? Richard replied, Margaret's. No debt. High value. Marcus asked why I would give him money. Richard answered, she won't give it to me. Emily will convince her to sell and invest. Not directly, he added. We'll structure it. Marcus asked whether Emily knew. She knows what she needs to know. I read that sentence twice. It resembled the language I had used in gentler circumstances. I told myself I withheld information to protect people. Richard withheld it to use them. The motives were different. The habit of deciding what others needed to know still made me uncomfortable. That discomfort was useful. It prevented me from turning myself into the uncomplicated hero of the story. More messages followed. Marcus complained that Emily had not pushed hard enough. Richard wrote, she moves when stability is at risk. I'll remind her what custody looks like without my income. Marcus answered, that's your wife. Richard replied, then she should act like it. A week before the anniversary dinner, Marcus warned that the lender would call Friday. Richard wrote, anniversary dinner Thursday. Her mother will be there. Easier when she can't avoid the conversation. Marcus asked what would happen if I refused. Then Emily deals with the consequences. No message showed that Richard planned to strike her. It showed the pressure he intended to apply. The assault was what happened when the plan met resistance. The messages also explained the attempted access to Halcyon's vendor file. At 10:54 on the night of the dinner, Richard wrote, dinner went bad. Emily talked. Margaret called someone. Marcus asked whether he should move the money. Richard answered, not yet. Check Vail files. At 11:38, the blocked login attempt occurred. Minutes later, Marcus wrote, access blocked. Richard replied, use old login. When that failed, Richard wrote, I'll deal with Aaron. Get remaining cash out tomorrow. The following afternoon, Marcus attempted the foreign transfer. Then investigators found the messages about the photograph of my house. Marcus sent the image to Richard first. She's still there? Richard answered, send it. Maybe she remembers she has something to lose. The threat was not a stranger's impulse. Richard had approved it. The final exchange concerned Noah. Marcus asked, you asked the kid? Richard replied, he notices things. Marcus warned that children repeated everything. Richard wrote, not when they think they're helping their father. That was the message that ended Emily's remaining uncertainty. She was quiet for a long time after I told her. Then she said, I'm not going back. Do not decide because of what I just told you. I'm not. What changed? Nothing changed. I finally stopped changing the meaning. She explained that Richard had trained her to treat every incident as separate. The broken lamp happened because he was tired. The money restrictions happened because she overspent. Carla was a problem because she disrespected the marriage. The slap happened because Emily embarrassed him. But it was never separate, she said. It was one system. The investigators had reached the same conclusion about the money. No single transfer proved the fraud, the pattern did. No single argument explained the marriage, the pattern did. I'm filing for divorce, she said. She had already filed for separation, but this was different, not a temporary boundary, a decision about the future. I'm sorry, I said. Why? Because some part of you is grieving. All of me is grieving. That doesn't mean I'm unsure. 2 days before the full board hearing, Daniel delivered the audit committee's final report to my house. It was 184 pages long. I read every page. The report did not use words like greed or betrayal. It used language that could survive lawyers. Undisclosed related party relationship. Material misrepresentation control override. Probable diversion of corporate funds. Attempted destruction of electronically stored information. At the end, the committee recommended that Richard be removed for cause, denied severance under the misconduct provisions of his contract, and referred to state and federal authorities. I finished after midnight. Rain tapped against the study windows. Thomas's old green filing cabinet stood in the corner, scratched near the bottom and too heavy to move without emptying. I had not opened it since the year after his death. Inside were early halcyon reports, investment memoranda, and board notes written in Thomas's hand. One margin note stopped me. Do not let one executive become the company. He had underlined it twice. Near the back, I found an envelope, Margaret. Halcyon governance, if ever needed. Inside was a letter dated 6 years earlier, shortly before Richard became a senior executive. Thomas wrote that Halcyon had grown too large for one person to be mistaken for the institution. Charismatic executives, he said, were useful until people became afraid to question them. The trust's voting position should remain quiet but never passive. If a future executive used personal loyalty to avoid oversight, the board had to be stronger than the individual. This includes family, he wrote, especially family. There was more. I know you prefer peace. I also know peace can become an excuse for leaving difficult truths unspoken. Do not protect Emily from information she may one day need. And do not protect me by pretending all my decisions were wise. I read that paragraph 3 times. Thomas had committed part of our original Halcyon investment before I fully agreed. I had packed a suitcase, he apologized. More importantly, he reversed part of the commitment, required 2 trustee approvals for future investments, and spent years proving his apology meant something. Richard apologized to restore access. Then he returned to the same behavior. The difference was not that Thomas never betrayed my trust. The difference was what he did after I told him. I carried the letter upstairs. Emily was awake, looking at an old design portfolio on her laptop. I gave her the letter. She read silently. When she finished, she placed it on the blanket between us. He knew you kept things from me. Yes. Did Dad? Yes. When did you first think something was wrong with Richard? The first time I saw you apologize to him for having an opinion. She looked at me. Thanksgiving, 4 years ago. You preferred the public magnet school for Noah. Richard wanted the private academy. You explained your reasons. He called you emotional. You apologized before continuing. Why didn't you say anything? I told myself correcting him would embarrass you. I thought you would say it was none of my business. I might have. That does not mean I should have stayed silent. She looked down. You were the one person who could have told me it wasn't normal. You're right. Why didn't you trust me? The truth is, I was afraid. Your father had died. You were building your own family. I thought if I criticized Richard, you might choose him and distance yourself from me. So you protected your access to me. Yes. That sounds like something Richard would do. The comparison hurt because it was not entirely unfair. The difference cannot be that my intention was better, I said. It has to be what I do after you tell me. She remained quiet. I cannot undo the years I avoided the right questions. I can stop deciding what you need without asking. What does that mean? I will help with legal costs if you want. I will provide a safe place. I will protect my house and perform my duties to Halcyon. And my marriage is yours. What if I go back? Every part of me resisted the possibility. I would be afraid. I would not pretend his behavior was acceptable. I would not give him access to my finances or use the trust to shield him. And me? You would still have somewhere safe. Even if you thought I was making a terrible mistake. Yes, how would I know you mean it? You would not know from tonight. You would know from what I do next. Thomas's lesson, apology mattered only when behavior made it credible. Emily touched the letter. What else haven't you told me? Probably more than I realize. That is not reassuring, no. But we can begin making a list. A faint smile touched her mouth. A disclosure schedule? I was a financial analyst. I know. Then she said, I filed for separation this afternoon. I had not expected the announcement because she had made the decision without consulting me. Are you certain? No. But you filed. Certainty is not the same as readiness. Rachel said I only had to decide what protection I needed now. That sounds wise. She also said separation does not require me to hate him. No, I do hate him sometimes, understandable, and sometimes I remember who he was before this. People were rarely false from the beginning. They became clearer under pressure. Do you think Dad would vote to remove him? She asked. Yes, you didn't hesitate. No, because Richard hit me, that is why I made the call. I looked at the audit report. It is not why I will cast the vote. That distinction mattered to both of us. The assault forced me to stop waiting. The evidence would decide his corporate fate. What happens in my marriage is because of what he did here, Emily said, touching her chest. What happens at Halcyon should be because of what he did there. I understand. Richard requested that Emily appear at the board hearing to answer questions about the blue folder. She declined. The board is deciding what he did to the company, she told me. My marriage is not his defense. And I am done entering rooms because he demands my presence. That was the final evidence I needed before the hearing, not against Richard. For Emily, the hearing took place in the 6th week. Richard arrived 12 minutes early wearing a charcoal suit and the dark blue tie Emily had given him for his 40th birthday. He carried nothing. He had always preferred other people to hold the documents. I stood near the boardroom window with Daniel. Richard spoke to the receptionist as if he were arriving for an ordinary executive meeting. Have coffee sent in, no breakfast. Catering has already been arranged, she said. I am still the chief executive. His lawyer lowered his voice. You are on administrative leave. Richard looked toward the open boardroom, then he saw me. His eyes moved to the chair at the end of the table. My gray folder rested in front of it. The nameplate read, Hayes Family Investment. Trust voting representative. He stopped. He had known I would attend. He had not expected to see my coat hanging on the chair he considered his. You're enjoying this, he said. No, don't insult me. I answered your question. You spent years pretending you had nothing to do with this company. I never pretended. You sat in your old house and let me talk about Halcyon as if you were hearing the name for the first time. I listened to you. That was the performance. No, your assumptions were the performance. He stepped closer. Where is Emily? She chose not to attend. Of course. She is not part of your corporate defense. She stole company records. Your counsel can present that argument. I asked where my wife is, and I answered the question relevant to this meeting. His lawyer touched his sleeve. Richard. He turned away. For years his self-control had looked like discipline. Now I understood it as calculation. He controlled himself when the cost of losing control was visible. At 8:30, Lena closed the boardroom door. Aaron joined by secure video from his attorney's office. He looked older than he had 6 weeks earlier. Marcus did not appear. His lawyer had provided records while advising him not to answer questions during an active criminal review. Richard sat along the side of the table with counsel. Lena sat at the opposite end from me. She opened the hearing. This special meeting concerns the Audit Committee's findings regarding related party transactions, executive control overrides, preservation failures, and conduct attributed to Richard Cole. I object to the characterization, Richard said. You will have time to respond. I am responding now. You are interrupting the statement of purpose. Your objection is noted, she continued. That was the first change in the room. Richard spoke. The room did not reorganize itself around him. Outside counsel summarized the investigation. Contracts, system logs, payment records, bank transfers, device backups, interviews, and corporate approvals. No single source controlled the conclusion. Richard's lawyer argued that the review began as personal retaliation after a marital dispute. Lena replied that Aaron's warning email and the audit flags predated the dinner. Counsel argued that Richard had been denied ordinary system access. Yes, Lena said. That was the purpose of preserving records. Then came the photograph documents. Richard's lawyer argued that Emily obtained them improperly and that the entire review was contaminated. Outside counsel answered that the principal findings did not depend on the photographs. The company owned the contracts, public filings established Cedar Ridge's ownership, banks produced the transfer records, Halcyon Systems preserved the approvals. The silver phone and external drives supplied the messages. The blue folder provided direction. It did not create evidence. Richard's lawyer challenged authorship of the messages. Starfin explained biometric unlocking, home network connections, vehicle pairing, office Wi-Fi, voice notes, and matching corporate actions. He displayed the exchange about using transition support because Aaron only needed paper, then the message instructing Marcus to describe them as college friends. Then the payment route through Vale and Redfern. Richard leaned forward. Marcus controlled those accounts. You will have response time, Lena said. He controlled Vale and Redfern. I did not control where every dollar went after legitimate vendor payments. Stephen displayed the Cedar Ridge spreadsheet, forecasting the amounts before Halcyon paid them. Richard's initials appeared beside the projected releases. That file was altered, Richard said. By whom? Pamela Green asked. I don't know. What is the basis of your claim? It contains language I would not use. Which language? He hesitated. Maintain deliverable cover. Stephen opened an earlier version recovered from Richard's corporate email. The same phrase appeared in an attachment he had sent to himself. Metadata does not prove authorship, Richard's lawyer said. No, Stephen answered. That is why we compare it with messages, approvals, transfers, and testimony. Aaron appeared on the monitor. Outside counsel asked whether he had questioned the Vale relationship. Yes. Did Richard disclose a financial relationship with Marcus? No. Did you ask? Yes. What was his answer? That they were college friends and there was no reportable relationship. Why did you continue approving payments? Aaron looked into the camera. Because I was afraid of losing my job. Richard laughed quietly. Aaron continued. That is not an excuse. I signed batches after I believed the documentation was inadequate. I should have reported it directly to the audit committee. Richard leaned toward his microphone. You approved every payment. Lena said his name. Aaron did not look away. Yes, I approved them. You were the chief financial officer. Yes, you controlled accounting. I controlled accounting procedures. You controlled the executive overrides and the vendor relationship. You are blaming me because you failed. I am accepting that I failed. The sentence changed the room. Richard's defense depended on everyone behaving as he did. Deflect. Minimize. Attack. Aaron's admission made Richard's refusal more visible. Counsel played part of the call Aaron had recorded after receiving legal advice. Richard's voice filled the boardroom. Emails can be misunderstood. Careers are harder to repair. When the recording ended, Richard spread his hands. That is career advice. Pamela asked, why were you offering career advice to a suspended CFO cooperating in an investigation into your conduct? Because Halcyon was being damaged by panic. Whose panic? He did not answer. Stefan displayed the messages concerning my house, Margaret's. No debt, high value. Emily will convince her to sell and invest. We'll structure it, Richard's lawyer objected. Lena allowed the material because it connected Cedar Ridge's shortage to an undisclosed plan for obtaining capital. Then the message about threatening Emily with custody appeared. Richard's lawyer stood. This is inflammatory marital material unrelated to executive performance. Outside counsel replied. It concerns a proposed source of capital for Cedar Ridge and Mr. Cole's method of obtaining it. Richard looked around the table. This is absurd. Margaret's house was never sold. No money came from it. You are treating a hypothetical family conversation as corporate misconduct. Pamela asked, was it hypothetical when you entered the projected proceeds in Cedar Ridge's recovery schedule? A planning assumption. Based on property you did not own. Based on a possible family investment, which Margaret had rejected. She did not understand the opportunity. I spoke for the first time. I understood the word no. Richard turned toward me. You understood nothing. You sat on 38% of this company and contributed nothing while I grew it. Lena told him to address the evidence. I am. This proceeding exists because Margaret could not stand that I succeeded without needing her. I looked toward the directors rather than him. My personal opinion is not evidence. Continue. That angered him more than an argument. Stephen displayed the attempted remote deletion. Marcus's message appeared. They have the second phone. Richard asked whether it was on. Then, I can wipe it, Marcus warned. Don't. That proves you're worried, Richard replied too late. The room became quiet, not doubtful. Quiet, Richard's lawyer whispered to him. Lena gave Richard 45 minutes to respond. He began with Halcyon's performance. Revenue had grown under his leadership. 2 divisions became profitable. The company entered new markets, all true. He described the burden of executive responsibility and said Vale had performed legitimate work. Also true at first. Then he made the argument he believed would save him. Every person in this room benefited from the results. No one spoke. He pointed toward Aaron's screen. He approved the payments. Toward Lena. She ignored the flags until Margaret called. Toward the directors. You enjoyed the returns. Then toward me. Your trust increased in value because of me. He had confused benefit with permission. Jonathan Reed said, I accepted business risks. I did not authorize undisclosed transfers to your personal project. They were consulting fees. For copied reports? Vale produced work. Worth $4.2 million? That is a matter of judgment. Pizzella asked, was concealing your partnership with Marcus also a matter of judgment? I did not consider Cedar Ridge material to Halcyon. You certified there was no financial relationship. Because it did not affect the services. Then why tell Marcus to call you college friends? Richard answered too quickly. Because Aaron was overreaching. His lawyer leaned toward him. Richard realized he had confirmed the conversation. For the first time that day, he looked tired. Lena asked whether he wished to address the attempted Thornton transfer. The pressure on Aaron, the school messages to Noah, or the threat involving my house. He looked at me. You brought a family dispute into my company. No, I brought a governance concern to the board. The records brought the rest. You wanted me gone. After you struck my daughter, I wanted her safe. And this? He pointed at the report. This is not about what I wanted. He laughed. You expect anyone to believe that? I do not need them to believe me. They have your messages. His expression changed. The hearing had reached the point he could no longer redirect. So he attacked the person who had stopped him. You think sitting in that chair makes you powerful? No. You think Thomas left you his judgment? No. He believed in me. Yes, that surprised him. He praised your ambition. He supported your advancement. He may have been wrong about what you would do with authority. You don't know what he intended. No, and neither do you. I rested my hand on the report. That is why we have bylaws instead of ghosts. Lena asked whether he had anything further. Richard looked at his lawyer. His lawyer shook his head. No. He waited in another office while the board deliberated. The discussion lasted 41 minutes. One director worried that removing Richard for cause would trigger litigation and harm Halcyon's customers. Another asked whether a negotiated resignation might reduce public conflict. Lena replied that a resignation could also imply uncertainty about the findings. The board reviewed the employment agreement, the audit report, customer risk, interim leadership, recovery options, and evidence preservation obligations. No one discussed the slap. No one mentioned Emily's divorce. No one needed to. Richard was excluded from the vote concerning his own removal. Of the 6 eligible directors, 5 voted in favor. 1 abstained because of prior business ties. Then Lena looked toward me as the trust's voting representative. In favor, I said. The motion passed. Richard returned to the boardroom. Lena read the decision. He was removed as chief executive and director for cause, effective immediately. Severance would be denied subject to final legal review. Halcyon would pursue civil recovery and refer the evidence to appropriate authorities. His face remained blank until Lena reached the denial of severance. Then he looked at his lawyer. He did not ask about the employees. He did not ask about the customer contract. He asked, who replaces me? The interim operating committee will continue while the board conducts a search, Lena said. That company will fall apart. Then the board will address it. He turned to me. This is what you planned when you made that call. No. You expect me to believe this happened because of one dinner? No accident, I said. I stood. I had imagined that moment more than once. In some versions I spoke about Emily. In others, I reminded him who built the trust he had underestimated. A speech would have given him the importance of a final argument. So I said only what the evidence had shown. No, Richard. You planned it. One decision at a time. Security escorted him from the room. No one applauded, no one celebrated. Lena confirmed the next preservation steps. Pamela gathered her pencils. Aaron's screen went dark. The company continued. That was the final correction to Richard's belief. He had never been Halcyon. He had only been trusted to lead it. And trust, unlike ownership, could be withdrawn. Emily waited in Daniel's office downstairs. Well, she asked. He was removed for cause. Her eyes closed, not with satisfaction, with release. And the authorities? The evidence will be referred. What happens now? To Richard? To us? That was the better question. You tell me, I said. She took a breath. I signed the divorce filing this morning. Before the vote? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? I needed one decision in my life that was not a reaction to what happened in that boardroom. She had not waited to see whether Richard lost power. She had decided he no longer had power over her. I found an apartment near Noah's school, she said. You can stay with me. I know. Is it safe? Yes. Can you afford it? She gave me a tired smile. That is the first question you ask. I am still your mother. I can afford it for now. Rachel is addressing support and access to marital funds. Carla connected me with a design firm looking for project help. When do you move? Next month. The news hurt a little. I wanted her close. Wanting was not the same as deciding. That sounds like a plan. She studied me, waiting for an objection. I did not give one. Richard was not arrested outside the boardroom. There were no handcuffs in the lobby and no reporters waiting beneath dramatic rain. The criminal process moved more slowly than anger. Banks responded to legal requests. Investigators reviewed devices and records. Lawyers argued over access. Marcus began cooperating after learning the messages had been recovered from more than one source. Halcyon filed a civil action to recover diverted funds. Several accounts tied to Cedar Ridge and Red Fern were restrained. Some money was found. Some was already tied up in land, debt, and failed construction. Justice did not arrive as one clean number returned to the company. It arrived in pieces. The customer that had suspended renewal discussions stayed after Halcyon disclosed the investigation, the control failures, and its remediation plan. The company did not pretend it had been blameless. That honesty preserved the contract. Aaron resigned as chief financial officer. The board found no evidence that he received diverted funds, but his failure to escalate concerns still had consequences. He cooperated with investigators and later accepted a non-executive role at a smaller company. He was neither a villain nor a hero. He was a man who knew enough to act and waited too long. I understood that kind of failure better than I wanted to. 3 weeks after the board vote, Emily moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment 7 minutes from Noah's school. It was on the second floor of a brick building, with narrow balconies and bicycles left near the courtyard stairs. The kitchen cabinets were white. The living room was smaller than the dining room in her marital home. Emily loved it. The light is good, she said on moving day. What about storage? The road may be noisy. I toured it at rush hour. The second bedroom is small. Noah is 9, not a touring orchestra. I stopped offering concerns. She noticed. You can say what you think. I have. No. You asked 8 questions and swallowed 12. I looked toward the bathroom. The tile is ugly. Emily laughed. It was the first unguarded laugh I had heard from her since the dinner. Yes, she said. It is terrible. You can design around it. There she is. Who? My mother. Noah's contact with Richard continued under temporary court arrangements. At first, visits were supervised. Richard objected to each restriction. He claimed the rules turned Noah against him. Emily did not discuss the financial case with their son. She did not call Richard names. She did not ask Noah to report on visits. When he returned quiet, she gave him space. When he returned angry, she allowed anger without treating it as disloyalty. One evening, I heard him ask whether his father was a bad person. Emily sat beside him on the floor of his new bedroom. Your father has made serious choices that hurt people. That means yes. It means I am not going to tell you what you have to feel. Do you hate him? Sometimes. Do you love him? She took longer to answer. I love the life I thought we had. That's not the same. No. Can I still love him? Yes. Even if you don't? Yes. That answer cost her something, but she gave it without making Noah pay. A month later, Emily began contract work with a commercial design firm. Her first assignment was to redesign reception areas for a group of medical clinics. The first time Richard's lawyer requested her income records, she feared that working would be used against her. Rachel reminded her that transparent income and stable employment were strengths. Richard's voice still lived inside ordinary decisions. It took time to recognize it, longer to stop obeying it. My role at Halcyon changed too. Several directors asked whether I would become board chair. I declined. The company did not need another powerful person mistaken for the institution. It needed stronger systems. I supported the appointment of 2 independent directors, tighter review of related party transactions, direct reporting from internal audit, and better protection for employees who raised concerns. Lena became temporary chair while the company searched for new leadership. Halcyon eventually hired a chief executive from outside. During our first meeting, he asked what the trust expected. Competence, I said. Transparency. And a board willing to disagree with you. He smiled. I assume that last one comes from experience. Yes. I did not tell him the whole story. Not every lesson needed to become a legend. The house remained mine. Richard never acquired an interest in it. The prepared signature material became part of the wider investigation, but no completed transfer existed. A realtor called twice after hearing rumors that I planned to sell. I said no. The roof needed work that spring. The upstairs plumbing leaked. The furnace made a sound like a truck climbing a hill. Richard had not been wrong that the house required maintenance. He had been wrong that difficulty created his right to decide for me. I hired people. I paid the bills. I kept the house. 6 months after the dinner, prosecutors announced charges connected to wire fraud, falsified corporate records, and diversion of company money. Richard pleaded not guilty. The assault matter proceeded separately. He later accepted a negotiated resolution that included accountability measures, continued restrictions, and compliance with family court orders. The financial case would take longer. Marcus entered a cooperation agreement. Not every dollar was recovered. I learned not to measure justice only by the speed of punishment. Richard lost the company, access to the diverted funds, and the unquestioned authority he had relied upon at home. But Emily's recovery could not be measured by his losses. Her life had to stop revolving around what happened to him. One Sunday evening in early fall, she and Noah came to my house for dinner. Nothing elaborate: roast chicken, green beans, potatoes, no private room, no polished silver, no directors. No one used the word asset. Noah talked about a school project involving erosion. Emily described a hotel proposal she hoped to win. I asked whether the timeline was realistic. She said it was. I disagreed. She explained why. Then she stopped in the middle of a sentence. What? I asked. You're disagreeing with me. Yes, and I'm disagreeing with you. Yes. Neither of us lowered our voices. Neither checked the doorway. Neither apologized. Emily smiled. It was a small moment, meaningless to anyone who had not lived through the previous months. After dinner, Noah went upstairs to find an atlas Thomas had given him. Emily carried 2 plates to the sink. I heard from Richard today, she said. Through counsel? Yes. What is he to discuss settling the property issues? Are you considering it? Yes. I waited. There was no additional explanation. My instinct arrived immediately. What terms? What assets? Had Rachel reviewed it? I asked one question. Nothing yet. All right, you're not going to ask what he offered. I am curious. That is a diplomatic word. I am intensely curious, she laughed. I'll tell you after Rachel reviews it. That sounds wise. She turned on the faucet. He also asked whether there was any chance we could reconcile. My hand stopped. What did you say? That there wasn't. Relief moved through me. He asked whether it was your decision, and? I told him you had finally learned not to make those for me. Finally? Would you prefer recently? No. I told him it was mine. How did he respond? He said I would regret it. The old threat still dressed as prediction. Did that frighten you? Yes. What did you do? I ended the call and sent the communication to Rachel. No dramatic declaration, no claim that fear had disappeared. She acted while afraid. That was the change. Later, after they left, I walked through the house checking the doors. The dining room was quiet. Thomas's chair remained at one end of the table. Though no one treated it as sacred anymore, the pipes clicked upstairs. The furnace started with its familiar complaint. Perhaps one day the house would become too much for me. I might sell it. I might downsize. I might leave it to Emily, establish another trust, or turn the study into something useful for people who needed financial guidance. The difference was not the decision. It was whose decision it would be. My phone rang before I reached the stairs. Emily. Did you forget something? No. Is Noah all right? He's fine. Then what happened? Nothing happened. I waited. I got the hotel project, she said. You did? They want me to lead the design team. That is wonderful. I'm terrified. Good. She laughed. That is a strange response. Fear means you understand the responsibility. That sounds like Dad. Your father had several useful sentences, and several bad decisions. We were getting better at remembering him honestly. The project will be demanding, she said. Some evenings, occasional travel. What about Noah? I arranged after-school care. Carla can help during travel weeks. I may need you sometimes, you only have to ask. I know. A silence followed. Then she said, Mom. Yes. Thank you for making the call. I leaned against the wall. For years, I wondered whether I should have acted sooner. You should have. The answer was direct. It no longer wounded me the way it once might have. Yes, but you made it when I finally told you I wasn't safe. Yes. You listened. I tried. You did more than try. At Halcyon, perhaps. No, at the house. What do you mean? You let me decide what happened next. No board report could record that part of the story. The phone call restricted Richard's corporate access. The evidence removed him. The temporary orders created distance, but safety was not merely the removal of a dangerous person. It was the return of one's own decisions. I love you, I said. I love you too. After the call ended, I climbed the stairs. The house creaked around me. Old wood, old pipes, old memories. It was not a fortress. It had never been the source of my power. Neither was the trust. Neither was the chair at the end of the boardroom table. Power had been the ability to act when silence became harmful. Restraint had been knowing when to step back. And love, I finally understood, was not deciding another person's life for them. It was making sure fear did not decide it either. The following Sunday, Emily disagreed with me again. This time it was about paint colors. I told her the gray sample looked cold. She told me I was wrong. I smiled, not because she was wrong, but because she was no longer afraid to say it.